Michael Patrick Shields is on the air.
Good morning, world.
Good morning, Michigan. A very pleasant Thursday to you. It is Michael Patrick Shields, heard all across the state of Michigan. And the anchorman, Gary Austin, is here with plenty of news to talk about this morning as we get started. Good morning, Mr. Austin.
Well, good morning, Michael Patrick. Boy, Governor Snyder wasting no time. In fact, he told us he wants to, hit the ground running, and he wasn't kidding. He's really bumped up the start date for the traditional State of the State address, January 19th this time.
Wednesday night, January 19th, I understand, right down the street here from the Capitol. And one wonders how he could possibly have assessed the state of the state in that short of amount of time.
Well, I think he's been assessing things even during the course of the election and probably months. I bet you he started assessing things the day he decided to run for the job.
Lawmakers and the governor have to figure out how to plug a $1.8 billion shortfall, and he's floated the idea of changing the state's business tax structure. He wants a 6% corporate profits tax instead of the current system. That plan, though, would cost the state $1.5 billion. That same money would be saved by businesses. So is the hole getting deeper? Does the hole have to get deeper before it can get more shallow? I don't know. People have been clamoring for details, and perhaps in this State of the State address on the 19th, the Wednesday evening, he'll give some of those details.
Yeah, the idea behind these, of course, the governor, traditionally, they will lay out their plan, their strategy, and then, of course, it's up to those in the House and Senate to get to work on it from there and figure out what's going to fly and what's not going to go. But I think we can really expect some dramatic changes. I bet you Rick Snyder is really going to get right down to brass tacks here. And I bet you we never know, but how detailed he's going to be come January 19th. But I would guess he's going to give us a good snapshot as to where we stand and what he has planned in the months ahead.
That speech is typically the very early part of February.
Yep.
So when he said the other day that he wants to work in dog years, in other words, he wants to have 6 months in 1 week or whatever ratio he suggested. Mm-hmm. He wants to prove that he's coming out with shock and awe and trying to accomplish a lot of things. There wasn't a lot of shock when Rich Rodriguez was fired yesterday, was there?
We could see that one coming. So now I guess the question is, who's going to take his place?
The shock is that Michigan, the University of Michigan football program, has put themselves back in a spot where they don't have a coach. And you would think, wouldn't you, Gary, that a job like that would have a line of succession, that there would be always someone waiting to come in next. And it happened last time. They ended up, without a coach when Lloyd Carr retired, and from what I understand, Rich Rodriguez was the second or third choice. And now, once again, the recruit signing date is coming up in early February, and they have a month without even a head coach.
Yeah, that's often overlooked, the importance of that whole recruiting business, because those who, for example, kids who are looking to go to they're in high school now, they're trying to make their decisions, and when things appear unstable, that's always a red flag in a lot of cases. So as a result, students will look at places that do have a coach in place that they can talk directly to, get an idea what direction the program is heading in. Not that long ago, it used to be the heir apparent, one of the assistant coaches, would obviously move up to the top spot when something like this happened. But that's really changed. Immediately we hear when someone ends up getting the axe for whatever reason, or they quit, we hear about a nationwide hunt, and that always takes time, and that adds a lot of questions to the whole process.
The media seem to have narrowed down the choices to 3 people. Jim Harbaugh, who played quarterback at Michigan, but he seems destined for the NFL. David Brandon even said that yesterday. He's currently the Stanford coach. The other choices seem to be LSU's coach Les Miles, who was an assistant at Michigan, and Brady Hoke, who's now with San Diego State. He was an assistant at Michigan, too, under Lloyd Carr. So we'll see what happens.
But again, those 3 are either the 3 really that close to the program right now?
Brady Hoke is doesn't have a winning record. That's one thing that people say about him. Les Miles, he made some enemies when he was here in Ann Arbor for supposedly some inappropriate behavior. But we'll see.
Would you say that at this point Harbaugh is the odds-on favorite?
Well, I think they would take him if they could get him, but he's supposedly not coming. So there you go. Ford Motor Company really has done a bang-up job, if you'll pardon the pun, in closing the quality gap, at least in terms of perception, haven't they?
Yeah, they really have. And at issue here is Toyota. Why is Toyota always the benchmark? It seems that's the way it is.
They set the mark.
They do. They do. It used to be the German automakers, but now the focus on the Asian automakers over the past several years. And yeah, Ford is really making headway. How about OnStar? You know, the initial deal OnStar had with General Motors was such that you buy a GM vehicle, you'd have that OnStar option, but now OnStar is being made available to any vehicle that's relatively new. It can't be too old. But from what I understand, OnStar is making a big to-do about this at the electronics show going on this week.
Consumer
in
Electronics
Vegas.
Show.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, getting a lot of attention. And for good reason, too, because if you want OnStar, if I understand it right, that you can just in effect, just replace the rear view mirror. They rewire that baby and put a new one in, and then you've got OnStar. It's that easy. You can't have a car. Your 1976 Pacer will not work. However, if you have something new over the last few years, it would, according to our friends at OnStar.
I have OnStar. I came to find out by accident in the, what am I driving here? Saturn Vue. I'm test driving a Saturn Vue for Cheryl Freebro, and it's available at her dealership. It's parked out in front of the studio right now because I'm test driving it, but if you wanted it, all you'd have to do is get in touch with Hyundai of Lansing. It's a Saturn Vue 2010, only about 8,500 miles, and it's only $18,495. It's like a new car for $18,000. It's just like a small SUV sort of car, and brand new, it was $25,000. But the point of it is, I accidentally pushed the button. I didn't even know I had OnStar, and I accidentally pushed the button, so I quickly shut it off because I didn't have anything to bother them with.
So what happened?
About a minute later, they called me back.
OnStar did?
Yeah.
Is that right?
So they must have figured possibly it was an accident or something, you know, that maybe I was in an accident or in some trouble.
In 1 minute, isn't that amazing? When you really think about it, think of all the OnStars in vehicles all over America, and here MPS by mistake hits the button, and in less than a minute, the OnStar people want to know what's going on.
I mean, they want to know if I needed any help or anything.
That's pretty good service.
So Toyota is still the top seller in the country, but what happened is because Toyota had quality troubles and Ford has been so strong in quality, they are now in a dead heat when people think of quality cars, and you always used to think about Toyota, and not so much anymore. Ford has caught them. Our Attorney General, Bill Schuette, is dedicated, as he told us on the air the other day, to stopping the health reform legislation. He doesn't like the idea that we will be forced to buy insurance. We will talk later in the program with incoming Congressman Bill Huizenga from West Michigan. He's the one that replaced Pete Hoekstra, and supposedly by next week there'll be a vote to repeal the health care law. They're going to do something interesting in Congress today. They're going to read the entire Constitution. Yeah,
the Republicans say this is long overdue, and you talk to those in the GOP, they say the country is so off track and has become so unhooked with the key document that got us here, the Constitution. They say it's time that we read that baby from start to finish and refresh everybody's mind in Washington that that's the document we follow and nothing else.
Yeah, some people say it's just political showmanship.
Well, of course, that's what the Democrats are saying, but the Republicans are saying this sort of thing is long overdue. But in any event, it's never been done before. It'll be curious to see how it shakes out and how long it takes. It'll take more than a few minutes.
They're also going to try to cut congressional budgets by 5% today, too.
Yep.
Which isn't, I guess their budgets are about $1 million a year for each member of the U.S. House of Representatives. So, you know, it's not a whole lot of money. It's a car lease for most of them.
Yeah, the Republicans, they make it clear, too, that this is just the beginning, these cuts. And it's interesting, the Republicans in Congress, Michael Patrick, they are sounding a lot like Rick Snyder. I mean, right out of the gate.
And no tax increases.
Yeah, making cuts, no tax hikes, and get a control on spending that both Rick Snyder and Republicans in Congress have said for a long time is out of control.
Michelle Bachmann, the representative, somewhat controversial from Minnesota, fresh off of winning re-election, is considering a presidential run, we understand. And she's going to start travel. She's going to be in Iowa on January 21st and talk with the leaders there. And that would make her an interesting candidate. She's a bit of a lightning rod, but I think that it might be a heck of a cat fight between her and Sarah Palin if
Yeah,
Sarah
yeah.
Palin's going to run.
They're both similar in a lot of ways, and they're both darlings of the Tea Party, folks, for sure. Hey, I got to ask you about this story, Michael Patrick. Get your take on this. When you drive along, right, and you have a cup of coffee in your hand, you be careful. You don't want to spill it on you or around you, or for heaven's sakes, don't spill it on the dash. You never know what could happen. But a pilot actually did that. He was drinking coffee, right, and he spilled it on his cockpit panel, and a false hijack warning was then triggered because of that. This happened on a United Airlines flight 940 from Chicago to Frankfurt, Germany. So at issue now is whether United Airlines warns pilots not to hold beverages over electronic consoles or not. And the investigation is underway there.
See that? No texting while flying, no eating in the cockpit.
Good advice.
You'd think they would know that, wouldn't you? And they'd
Yeah,
have
you
some
never
sort
know.
of sealed, water bottle or something. Senator Stabenow will join us when we get back, and lots of surprises this morning, too. It's Michael Patrick Shields. So I've gotten a number of emails at mpsbigshow@aol.com and through our Facebook page from people who said, did you see the story out of Cleveland, Ohio about a panhandler who became an internet sensation after the Columbus Dispatch posted a video of him and his polished radio voice, and that the Cleveland Cavaliers have offered him a job at Quicken Loans Arena. The Cavaliers were so taken with this guy named Ted Williams, they extended the homeless fella an unspecified position as well as housing assistance. He's 53 years old, and he says he was a radio announcer before drugs and alcohol took over his life, but he's been sober now for 2 years. And the interesting part to me is I thought that you're homeless after your radio career. But apparently he's going to have a new radio career. And here's what he sounds like on the internet. This is what the Cleveland Cavaliers were so excited about.
Hey, I'm going to make you work for your dollar. Say something with that great radio voice.
When you're listening to nothing but the best of oldies, you're listening to Magic 98.9. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you. And we'll be back with more right after these words.
We'll be back with more right after these words.
And don't forget, tomorrow morning is your chance to win a pair of tickets to see this man live in concert. Thank you so much. Well, when I was 14 years old, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. When I was 14, I kind of listened to one of our area radio announcers. And I went as a field trip to go meet the guy, and he looked nothing like what he sounded like. So I asked him about that, and he said to me, listen, radio is defined theater of mind. And so when he said theater of mind, I just said, well, hey, I can't be an actor, I can't be an on-air personality, but the voice just became something of a development over years, and I went to school for it. And then alcohol and drugs and a few other things became a part of my life.
If you saw him, you'd see that he's got black, sort of mangy hair, and he's in a camouflage outfit, and choppers aren't so good. I mean, he looks like a homeless person, but he sounds like that. And we have Theater of the Mind here, too, on radio, because we're on stations all across the state. But we're also on Fox 47 television, so we have to, look spiffy as we can anyway every morning. So if you're in the Lansing area, check us out on Fox 47. And if you're watching on Fox 47, don't forget we're on the radio in Lansing on 1240 a.m. So once you leave your home and get in the car, you can listen to us on the radio. We're on stations, too, in Mount Pleasant, Petoskey, Traverse City, Hastings, Saginaw, Manistee, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Ludington, Muskegon, and Benton Harbor. Didn't end so well in terms of health for a deer that was trapped on Lake Allegan, and there were some people trying to save this animal. It was on Saturday. The DNR would not go onto the frozen water to rescue the animal because the conditions were unsafe. They contacted some people who had an airboat. The DNR also helped, and the doe appeared to be in good health when returned to the shore. However, after examining her, the DNR had to put the animal down due to injuries. Stuck on the ice was that deer there in West Michigan. 37-year-old Kentwood man was taken into custody yesterday. He's accused of robbing a Wyoming gas station. He was out on parole from a larceny offense, awaiting arraignment on an armed robbery charge already, and he stormed into the Marathon gas station on 28th Street Southwest and implied that he had a weapon, took off with some money and some cigarettes. The Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. It's an annual tradition where all the new gadgets are rolled out. We're going to go live to Las Vegas when we get back and find out what the latest gizmos and electronic toys and, work tools are. Stay tuned for that. It's Michael Patrick Shields on Thursday. So one of the neatest trade shows you would ever be lucky enough to go to is the Consumer Electronics Show, and it takes place at this time of year every year in Las Vegas with all the bells and whistles and so forth. And it's where all the gadgets and the electronic toys are previewed, and even some of the spec ones that maybe won't ever come out. You get a sneak peek at the latest cutting-edge gadgets. And Kat Schwartz is on the other end of our line live from Las Vegas, one of the leading tech experts in the country. She's been on the Today Show regularly, on the Howard Stern Show, live with Regis and Kelly, and in Stuff Magazine, and you can find her on her website, hightechmommy.com. Kat Schwartz, good morning to you.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
So with a time difference in Las Vegas, did you stay up all night at the tables, or did you actually get some?
I did. I stayed up. I won about $10,000 last night, and here I am now.
Are you joking?
I'm joking.
10,000.
Yeah, I went to sleep at like 7.
Oh, in Las Vegas, that's not easy to do.
I know, but I wanted to talk to you about all these cool gadgets and sound like I know what I'm talking about instead of like a zombie. So
Yeah. Well, you have discipline. That's pretty good. That's the high-tech mommy is what you are. And so we always hear about this program. It makes national news, international news, if you will, and it's all the new gadgets, and you're lucky enough to be there to have a sneak peek. What has wowed you so far?
Well, I've seen a lot of cool stuff coming out of the high-definition TV, 3D TV space, lots of people just spinning new takes on old gadgets, and some of the things that I really like are the gadgets that are going to make my life easier as a mom. So I went out, I worked with a bunch of companies, and this is what I've come up with so far. I love this. Okay, so this is the Kenmore Elite washer and dryer. It's a washer and dryer. It's this great red color. It does a fantastic job at washing my clothes, but it has the ability to actually call a technician if I'm having any problems, okay? Mm-hmm. It's called Kenmore Connect, and what I do is if it's having any trouble, I can take my phone and hold it up to the washer or dryer, and it will actually talk to the technician and tell the technician what's going on if I'm having any problems or questions, and it fixes it. How cool is that?
Wow, that's a little spooky.
I know, it's like the Jetsons.
Yeah.
It won a CES Innovation Award, and I just like the fact that it can make phone calls. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, I guess if you could apply that to some other things like cars that break down, they now have a computer system that tells you what's wrong with it, and that's why not washer and dryer?
Yeah, and they're actually, to that point, going to be integrating this Kenmore Connect capability into other devices. Mm-hmm. So, if your refrigerator is doing something or anything that, they're going to apply it to so that it cuts down on having technicians having to come out if anything ever goes wrong. It's a fascinating concept.
Yeah, and we know that computers can do that now too, can't they? Where you can connect through with a technician who can then sort of virtually tap in and poke around with your computer and find out what's wrong with it.
Yep, absolutely. I like that. So my mom doesn't have to call me anymore for tech advice. She can actually call the right person.
Yeah. What else have you seen?
Let's move on to smartphones. Okay, these are all of the buzz, and this particular phone was just announced today. A lot of people are talking about it. It's called the Motorola Click 2 with Moto Blur, and it's a phone that I like because it's got its own keyboard on it. It slides up, and it has a keyboard, which is good. Mm-hmm. But it has 3 different home screens. So it's a perfect way to balance my life between my work, my home, and my social life. So I can toggle between those 3 home screens. And on the screens, I've got all my apps and shortcuts and widgets and everything I need. Very powerful phone. It's fast. I like the way it looks. I like the way it fits into my hand. But again, that Moto Blur is a really cool concept because I do have 3 different lives as a mom. I've got my work, my home, and my social life. So this separates them into those 3 sections, and, it's getting a lot of buzz.
The 3 faces of Kat Schwartz, huh?
Yeah, that's it. Now, as a parent, you You want to capture every moment, every cute thing your child does. So Samsung has come out with their new camcorder. This is also getting a lot of attention here at the show. It's called the Samsung HMX-Q10, and it's a nice size camera. It definitely fits right into the palm of my hand, and it has something on it called switch grip. So the LCD swings out to the side like an arm. It can be flipped around, so you can look at it either way. But the coolest thing about it is if you have someone that's a lefty or a righty, the camera actually self-adjusts depending on which way you hold it. So it's very comfortable to hold in your right hand or your left hand. And it's full HD. It's got a great price point. Also, it only has one button to press to stop and start recording. I love that because it just makes everything easy and neat. So one button recording. Lastly, my children love to touch my gadgets, which is fine, except they often get them all dirty because they've got grubby little fingers. So I came across these screen protectors that I really like because they're very easy to apply. They're called the 3M Natural View screen protectors. These are great because a lot of times when you try to apply these things, they get all bubbly. These are very easy and don't bubble up when you're putting them on your devices. I highly suggest getting them for any gadget you have, any smartphone you have. It's just like a sticker.
What will they think of next, Kat Schwartz?
I know, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, we'll find out for sure at hightechmommy.com. And have fun in Las Vegas. And thanks for the lively report. All the best to you. That's Kat Schwartz, one of the leading tech experts in the country, live from the Consumer Electronics Show. It's Michael Patrick Shields. So this is Toni Braxton, and the R&B singer has gotten herself into some trouble. She filed for bankruptcy for a second time in October. She owed up to $50 million to creditors in California and Nevada. Big star in her time, and now in financial trouble. I don't know how that happens, but it does. And Toni Braxton is now weighing a possible Playboy spread. She has said on her Twitter account that she'd love to pose with Hugh Hefner. She says he's the sexiest guy I know over the age of 30. Hugh is well north of 30. He's in his 80s. I think he just got married. Toni Braxton is 43, and she said that Playboy has contacted her in the past, and now she's, let's say, a little more pliable to the idea of posing for Playboy, and especially if she can do it with Hef. We never let the birthday of a beautiful woman pass without taking note. Bonnie Franklin is 67 today. Remember her in the show One Day at a Time. Julie Chen is host for the CBS Early Show. She's 41. And Gabrielle Reese, also 41, the supermodel and volleyball player. And if I'm not mistaken, she's married to that surfing guy. What's that very famous surfing guy's name? They live in Hawaii there. It'll come to me. Anyway, happy birthday, darlings, to all of you. The People's Choice Awards were last night. Winners were Adam Sandler. Conan O'Brien got the favorite talk show host nod. The Twilight Saga Eclipse was also an award winner. The Fox show's House and Glee, and CBS's show Hawaii Five-0. And Bleep, My Dad Says, got some honors. That's a TV show with William Shatner. Taylor Swift and Katy Perry were among the winners, too. It was hosted by Queen Latifah at the Nokia Theater in Los Angeles there on CBS. So congratulations to all those People's Choice Award winners. Let's talk some sports this morning for you. The Detroit Lions standout rookie defensive tackle Ndamukong Suh going to have surgery on his shoulder. He's going to miss the 2011 Pro Bowl after all. He had to make a decision whether to play in the Pro Bowl or have surgery as soon as possible so he could begin his rehab. So he is going to undergo surgery on Monday. He wanted to make sure he was 100% healthy and ready for the off-season program, which we appreciate around Detroit. He's going to go to the Pro Bowl anyway, not to play, but just to support Calvin Johnson, the other Lions player who was chosen to start in that game for the NFC. So he's going to get to go to Hawaii for the R&R, not have to fool around with the football, and get that shoulder ready. What a great year the rookie had. 10 sacks. Just the second rookie defensive tackle in NFL history to reach that number. He had an interception return and a fumble for a touchdown. So get well soon in Ndamukong Suh and enjoy the islands. Michigan Wolverine football team looking for a head coach. David Brandon yesterday fired Rich Rodriguez and said he thinks Jim Harbaugh is going to the NFL, so they're going to have to look elsewhere. But signing date's only a month away for recruits. So could it be San Diego State's Brady Hoke, who was an assistant at Michigan? Could it be Les Miles, who was an assistant at Michigan? Or could it be someone altogether different? The Wolverine basketball team couldn't keep up in the second half yesterday. They lost to Wisconsin 66-50 in Madison. Michigan is now 1-2 in Big Ten play, but 11-4 overall. And they've got a third-ranked Kansas coming in Sunday afternoon to Ann Arbor. Jack Morris and Alan Trammell didn't make it into the Baseball Hall of Fame after the voting yesterday. Only infielder Roberto Alomar and Bert Blyleven were named to the class of 2011. Now, everybody thinks Jack Morris probably deserves it. Didn't quite make it. Alan Trammell got 24.3% of the vote. You need 75% of the vote to get in. And Jack Morris as well didn't get. He only got 53%. Now, Bobby Higginson, who somehow ended up on the ballot, didn't even reach the 5% mark, so he's dropped from future Hall of Fame voting. That ends it for him. And Juan Gonzalez just barely got 5%, so he'll be around on the ballot again. 2 days after beating Virginia Tech, now this plays into what David Brandon said yesterday. Stanford coach Jim Harbaugh could begin a move to the next level. ESPN is saying that he met with the 49ers for 5 hours on Wednesday to talk about their vacant head coaching position. And there you have it. That is a look at sports. And most of the insiders think that Jim Harbaugh will stick around the San Francisco area. Stanford is there in Palo Alto, not far from San Francisco. And Jim Harbaugh is from that area originally. So he would coach the 49ers and be able to stay home, not move his kids and all that sort of stuff. The newly elected congressman from West Michigan will join us later. Bill Huizenga from Ottawa County. He was sworn into office yesterday by House Speaker John Boehner, and we look forward to getting his perspective on what it's like to go to Washington. 4 Michigan residents are going to get a little piece of that Mega Millions jackpot, although the 2 big winners were in Idaho and Washington. 4 Michigan residents matched 5 white balls, and they're going to take home $250,000 each. Congratulations to them, and spend it wisely is what they would say. Stocks closed higher yesterday. Investors moved on a positive employment report, and 300,000 jobs were added in the private sector in the month of December, so the Dow gained 32. The S&P was up 6, and the NASDAQ up 21. Mortgage applications rose. Americans are trying to refinance their home because a 30-year fixed rate now is 4.82%. And, well, the rest of it, including a matter about fuel economy, will come to you next hour. Do Americans really care about clean air? A survey will reveal whether they factor that in when they're buying a new car. It's Michael Patrick Shields on Thursday. Good morning, Michigan. A very pleasant Thursday to you. It's Michael Patrick Shields. We're on the lookout right now for Bill Huizenga. Congressman Huizenga is what I should be calling him, the Republican from the 2nd Congressional District here in Michigan, who was sworn in yesterday for the very first time. And we're excited to hear how that went and how he's settling in there in Washington, D.C., where it's going to be an interesting day today, Gary, because they're going to read the Constitution. This was a campaign pledge that Republicans made. And they just want to remind everybody what is actually in the Constitution. So the entire thing will be read today on the floor of the House of Representatives in Washington. Also, the new Republican-controlled House with Speaker John Boehner from Ohio. The Republican there is going to move to cut congressional budgets by 5%, and Republicans say that's just the beginning of efforts to slash federal spending.
Yep.
Democrats, though, as you may not be surprised to know, are calling it political theater. And then tomorrow comes the big effort to repeal the landmark health care reform bill that became law last year. That repeal, though, as we've talked about on the show for the last couple days, is expected to hit a brick wall because Democrats still control the Senate, and they've gone so far as to send a letter over to the House of Representatives to say, don't bother sending it to us because it's not going to get past the Senate.
Well, there's a Republican strategy here behind that. And the attempt by Republicans is to keep this thing, top of mind, keep it in the front of the news. Everybody keeps talking about it. And the Republicans are convinced that more and more folks, as they read this thing, they'll realize that it's just so expensive. And the government involvement is such that most Americans don't want it. So they figure Yeah, they're convinced that the Senate's going to say no question of that, because Democrats still control things. But they figure they could be hammering away on this, and they turned it into a real political issue. Those Democrats who supported this thing, and many of them did, and they ended up losing their jobs as a result of it in the last elections. Republicans are looking ahead and they're thinking, okay, if we can keep the pressure on here and really make this a Democrat thing, that it can convince more voters come next election that those who are supporting it should be ousted, just like the Democrats who lost their jobs last time. That's the strategy. Whether it works or not, we'll see.
I said just before we took the news break there that I was curious to know, how much do Americans care about clean air? In other words, according to Consumer Reports, how many people take in the idea of having an environmentally friendly vehicle when they go shopping for a car? And I won't make you guess the number right now, but I will reveal that with George Volman, the Automotive Insider, a little bit later this hour. So the question is, what are people interested? You hear a lot about green technology, and the question will be answered with George Volman and Consumer Reports. Do Americans really care? Do they really care about having, a car with low emissions and high mileage and all that sort of thing?
I think, Michael Patrick, it's a direct split. I think you're going to have a big bunch of Americans who say, yes, it's really important, and everybody else says, I could care less. I think there are very few in between. You're either on one extreme or another on that one. That's my take.
Well, stay tuned for that coming up. Now, here's a sensitive topic that I would like the listeners, you, if you would, to give me your comments on. Our phone number is 888-900-9966. That's 888-900-9966. And Gary Austin, since you're in the news business, I'd be curious to hear what you think about this. In Philadelphia, a federal jury is going to be asked to decide whether it's acceptable for an African-American person, but not a white person, to use the N-word in the workplace. Have you ever used the N-word in the workplace for any reason at all?
Oh, of course not.
You haven't. Well, here's the thing.
No. I mean, not even in news copy. I mean, and all reporters, I mean, they adhere to this. I mean, you'll hear it described as the N-word, which is, I mean, if you're referring to somebody who uses that terrible word, that's the way it's referred to.
Here's the way it came out. The U.S. District Judge has ruled that a former Fox reporter and anchor, Tom Burlington, he has a lawsuit against the station claiming there's a double standard and alleging that he was the victim of racial discrimination, and it might go to trial.
Now, is he white?
Yes. He was fired after using the N-word during a staff meeting in which producers and reporters were discussing Robin Taylor's story about, remember they had that symbolic burial of the N-word?
Yes.
That was happening around the country. The Philadelphia Youth Council had that burial where they said, we don't want to hear this word anymore. We're going to they put it in a coffin and bury it and distinguish it. And they don't want anybody to use it, whether you're black or white. They just want to banish the word for real. So he's working there, and they're having a discussion. And the phrase N-word is used in the staff meeting. And they talked about it, and they used the real word when they were talking about the story as to, whether or not you should use the word in the story. And they were talking about whether it would be a more powerful story if they actually used the word. Well, this fella used the word, and his colleague, a producer who is one of 3 African-American employees, said, I can't believe you just said that. And Burlington said he didn't necessarily expect the reporter to use the word in her story, but he thought it would give it more credence, like I said. But nevertheless, he ends up getting fired from the TV station because he said, wait a minute, how come if you're black you can say the word? Because there were at least 2 or 3 other instances where they were in production meetings and a black person used the N-word in full. But because he's white and he used the word in full, they fired him. And he was talking about the historical context. And he knows it's a terrible word, but he wasn't using it in a derogatory fashion. He was using it to discuss the issue as to whether or not it should be used in the story.
Well, some would say just saying the word at all is derogatory and hurtful and unnecessary. And I think that's where the story comes down on. I think, boy, that story... And the way it shakes out in the word, it means different. It means it has more of an impact, obviously, on those who it affects the most, and of course those are African Americans. And it's a deeply set word that dates back to a time in this country where slavery and issues involving unfair treatment of minorities. So it means something to different people, and it would just seem to me, if you're asking my opinion, just eliminate it entirely, and then no one's offended, and then it's a non-issue. Just don't say it. Don't use it. If you've got to refer to it, whether in a historical context or in a news story in this case, I think obviously nowadays saying the N-word makes the point.
Well,
agreed.
This jury,
agreed. Does that make sense?
Well, I don't use it just because I don't. And,
yeah, and it's not right. It's inappropriate.
I certainly wouldn't use it on the air, but this jury now is going to have to decide whether the reporter, the anchor, was a victim of political correctness or a victim of his own poor judgment. That's what the question really is. So can black people on the staff there use the N-word in its full without any problems? And if they can do it, how come white people can't, and is that fair, is sort of the question in this story out of Philadelphia. And it's going to probably go to trial, and then the courts are going to have to sort that out. Because
so what's at stake here? Is it a lawsuit?
Yeah, he's suing the station because he says because they fired him, he was the victim of racial discrimination because there were members of the staff who were black who used it with no repercussions. He used it, and he got the ziggy.
I wonder if that'll be that case will be a test case, in a sense, where how that shakes out will, to a large degree, determine how future cases like this could take shape. Often in court cases, they refer to other cases. So, yeah, it could be a precedent-setting case, no question.
So our phone number is 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. Do you think he should have been fired for using the N-word? They were having a production meeting, so it's not like he called someone the word or used it in a flippant fashion. They were discussing a story that had to do with the N-word. And should he have been fired for that? Should he have his job restored? Or should he just not use the word at all? And if so, is it okay for black people to use the word but not white people?
Well, the moral of the story is the word's reprehensible. Don't use it. If you've got to use it in an historical context or in a news context or just discussing the word and all of the negative connotations and how terrible it is, simply say the N-word. I mean, that's accepted today as a replacement for the word that's obviously hurtful to a lot of Americans.
And, it's interesting, too, that isn't it sort of silly that when you say the N-word, those three words, the N-word, everybody knows what word you're talking about.
Right.
Your mind immediately goes to that full word anyway. So it's sort of funny that you can say the N-word and people don't get upset, even though that's exactly the concept that you're talking about.
Well, it's sad we have to reference it, but in some cases, historically and otherwise, it has to be, and that is, you're right, it's the accepted way as a substitute.
You remember Dr. Laura, that famous syndicated radio host, she essentially lost her job because she was using the full-on N-word in context as well, talking about in rap music they use the word, and nobody gets upset about that. And she said in a song she heard it 13 times, and so she said the N-word 13 times, and the advertiser said, well, even though you're making a point, you can't do that. And so she lost her job.
The moral of the story is don't say it. Period.
Let's see what our listeners say about that. As soon as we get back, Julie in Lansing will be up, and your calls too at 888-900-9966. It's Michael Patrick Shields. 22 after the hour. So if you've ever read Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, it's known as America's greatest novel, but did you know that the N-word is used in that novel 219 times? And some teachers have opted out of teaching the classic because of the offensive language. So there's a scholar, Alan Gribbins, at Auburn University. He's a professor. He's decided to make a change to the classic novel through the publishing company New South. And in February, a version of the classic will replace the N-word with the word slave. And he said that enables us to set this inflammatory racial epithet aside and begin to address the greatness of Twain's works. It does, however, take away from the true literary work and what the author really meant to say in the words that represented the time. So is that political correctness to go back and change the word even in history, the N-word? And we're talking this morning about the television reporter from Philadelphia, the anchor, who used the N-word, the full-on N-word, in the production meeting and was fired. And there are black members of the staff who have also used the word there, and they were not fired. So it's going to trial, and the judge will decide, I guess, if it's okay to use the N-word if you're black, but not if you're white. Our phone number for your comments, 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. Brian in Jackson is ringing in. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
What do you think?
Personally, I think all of them should have got fired.
Anybody who used it at all, black, white, male, female, whatever.
Yeah, I don't care. If you use that word in that production meeting, you should have been fired just like the one guy. I mean, personally, I've grown up with it. I'm sick of it. I'm about to have a child, and I don't want my kid to go through this. Mm-hmm. I think that is one word that should just be taken out of everybody's vocabulary from like now on. All it does is start trouble.
The interesting part of the story is that the production meeting was actually about the N-word. They were having one of these ceremonial burials in Philadelphia where they're trying to, as you say, extinguish the N-word, stop people from using it. So in order to do that, they had a symbolic burial where they would have a coffin and they would have a ceremony, say, we're putting this word to rest once and for all. And they were trying to draw attention to the fact that nobody should ever use it. And the debate in the production meeting, as I understand it, was in the report, should we use the full word or should we say the N-word? Because this anchor felt that it gave more credibility to the story and more punch, I suppose, if you use the real word and not say the N-word. So the question is now going to be, was he a victim of discrimination or did he just have bad judgment?
I would say a victim of discrimination. I mean, if it's good enough for the black people on your staff to be able to say that word, it should be good enough for the white people on your staff to say that word.
Mm-hmm. In context,
personally, I'm one that is really sick of double standards. I hate that it's good enough for this person to be able to do or say, but because I'm this person, I can't do or say that.
Comedians use it. You hear it in rap songs, and they get away with it. But somebody uses it in the office, and doesn't shake out.
Well, I know, and I mean, look at the rapper Eminem. He's one of the biggest, rap stars out nowadays. He's white, but out of respect for everything he does, you can go back through all of his music, and you will never find that word coming out of his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might find it coming out of the mouths of people that he has on the records with him, but I personally have never heard that come out of that man's mouth.
All right, Brian,
and I mean, that just shows, to me, that shows you right there that if a person that makes his money doing something that was, that's more or less a black artist, controlled thing, he's smart enough not to use it and still make millions.
Smart enough, indeed, to know the boundary of, I guess, political correctness. Then what will the court determine that boundary to be? We'll find out. Thank you, Brian, for the very thoughtful call. Kevin in Lansing ringing in at 888-900-9966. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
What do you think?
Well, I think, I got a lot of friends that use that word, and, sometimes it's like, okay, it's all right for us to say it, but it's not all right for them to say it. But if everyone uses it, I'm in favor of everybody using it. So it may be able to take some of the, the glamour out of the word. Because, if somebody uses the word a lot, people tend to be like, I don't want to use that word anymore. Let's make up another word. So basically, I just think that the politically correctness of this word has actually made it more popular with the young kids, and I just think people should use it however they like to use it, and you make your decision on if they're racist or not. But at the same time, the more people use it of all races, the less the less it will want to be used by, I guess, the young hip generation, because they see it as something that, okay, it's a term of endearment. But I just think everybody should use it to refer to everybody. Even white people should use it to refer to white people. And people will be like, man, that's an old word. Let's get another word. And that's what I think we should do with that word. Don't bury it.
Because right now it's a shocking word to use, isn't it, in some cases?
Yeah, especially like if you're out and, you're at a table, with a bunch of your friends, and they're using that word, and white people are looking at you like, their ancestors died because people were using that word, and now they just use it like willy-nilly. So I just think that, it's just, I don't know, it's weird, but at the same time, I just think that it's too politically correct, and I don't think you should have that politically correctness with any word, because if you try to ban something, only thing you're going to do is get more of it.
Yeah, so, then that's when you're giving the word power, I guess.
Exactly. You need to take the power out by letting everybody use it willy-nilly.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Kevin. We appreciate that call from Lansing. I guess, there are some terms, for certain members of different nationalities that in some circles are very offensive. In other words, other circles are just kind of throwaways. Like because I'm of Irish descent, the word paddy is, derogatory, but nobody gets really terribly upset about it. They just sort of say, oh, yeah, well, whatever, because I guess there's been a lot more time. This is really still reasonably fresh history that some people are still living here in America. It is 30 minutes after the hour. It's Michael Patrick Shields. We've been following what's been called the War in the Straits of Mackinac, the situation with the ferries there, and we've talked to a number of people over the last few months about how it's all going to pan out. And Jim Wynn is with us, the owner of Arnold Transit, and he's going to bring us up to date on what is happening. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Michael Patrick.
When last we left off this story, the city of Mackinac Island, the city council was supposed to sort of lay out what the groundwork was going to be for all three ferry companies to continue for the next 2 years, as I understood the new license would be. And there was a meeting that was to be had, I think, between Christmas and New Year's. That meeting got canceled. What are you hearing now? Is the city council going to lay out the guidelines anytime soon?
Yeah, I've been informed that I believe next Wednesday, I'm not exactly sure what the date is, next Wednesday afternoon, late afternoon, there'll be a transportation committee meeting followed by a city council meeting.
Are you concerned?
The subject of that transportation meeting is going to be focusing on the 2011 schedule.
What times, when the season starts, when it stops, how many trips across you can make, and also I understand how much you can charge for a ticket. True?
I don't think next week that'll the fares. I don't think the fares will be discussed next week. It's my understanding it's just going to be focused on schedule only.
Aren't fares something that you're definitely going to need to know pretty soon in terms of budgeting?
Oh, absolutely. But I think that's going to be in a subsequent meeting. At least that's my understanding.
Are you concerned about what limits the city council might set? In other words, could it hamper the way you do business?
Absolutely.
What would be the most?
But again, this is this is a public utility that's regulated by the municipality, and the municipality is going to dictate the terms.
Well, you say it's a public utility, but in your case, it's a commercial venture, right?
I don't say it's a public utility. The ferry boat code says it's a public utility.
Well,
it's been a public since the enactment of the ferry boat code in 1978. The ferry boat transportation system, both freight and passengers, has been a public utility regulated by the municipality.
There was some time that it was thought that the Star Line might merge with the Arnold Line. Is that still in your plans? You own both of them?
I do not. And what we've been talking all along, and what we've been talking about for years, has been more likely a joint venture. In other words, like a joint operating system. Mm-hmm. And we included Shepler in that discussion over the period of years too, but he opted to take a different tack. But I think that it's our collective opinion that consolidation is the way to go, and we would do it through a joint operating venture.
So what we know for the moment is that all 3 ferry lines will get a 2-year license as long as you comply with the schedules and the rate demands and that sort of thing.
It's schedule, it's the fare, what we're going to charge, and also on top of that there'll be a franchise fee that the ferry system has to pay to the city.
Is that new?
All of those are up in the air.
Is the franchise fee a new addition to what the way you have to operate?
No, that's been in existence since the ferry boat code, 1978.
Okay. Let's keep our fingers crossed and hope that the gas prices don't go up too much. We're hearing frightening stories about the cost of oil and what it could mean for the cost of gas, and I know that would have a direct effect on your business and all other sort of public transportation, ferries, and you and I at the pump. Jim Wynn will keep us up to date. Thank you very much. He's the owner of Arnold Transit, the ferry boat that takes us to Mackinac Island, the headquarters of Pure Michigan. 35 after the hour. And politics is our family business. Interesting day in Washington today. To fulfill a campaign pledge, Republicans are going to read the U.S. Constitution on the floor of the House. And one of them will be the brand new congressman from West Michigan. He succeeded Pete Hoekstra, and his name, as you know by now, is Bill Huizenga. Congressman Huizenga, how does that ring to you?
MTS, thanks for having me on. And it is a little strange now that we've removed all the qualifiers, the soon-to-be or the member-elect and all these other things. So days finally arrived, but myself and my colleagues were raring and ready to go and chomping at the bit.
What was it like, and I know it had to be an overwhelming feeling yesterday to be sworn into the United States House of Representatives and become even more of a part of history?
Well, it was a very fulfilling and emotional day. I had my entire family out here in Washington, literally from my 4-year-old youngest son to my 89-year-old father, and that was a pretty cool feeling. And my dad said to me, he said, you know, my family came from very poor means and you know, just really hard scrabble back in the day, and my dad was talking about his dad, my grandfather, and said, you know, Grandpa just would never have believed this. And I think that's really the story of America. You know, you look around at all of those 435 people that have been elected, and it's democracy in action, and it really is a testament to what we have in this country. It really in a transfer of power that didn't involve any shooting and firing and all of those other things that we see around the country or around the world. Yeah, we've got a very special place we live.
What's been the biggest surprise about being a congressman since you've been in Washington with all these sort of initiation classes and learning your way around? Has there been a big surprise?
You know, not any huge surprises for me. I think that some of that was my advantage coming in, having worked for Pete Hoekstra for a period of years and having been in the Michigan legislature. But you're definitely in the big leagues now, and you know, the pitches are faster and curveballs break further, and they're pitching at your head. There's no doubt about that. But it really is a different spirit and one of optimism out here right now.
Glad to hear that. Now, today, this business about reading the U.S. Constitution on the floor, will you sit through that entire reading?
I am planning on it. Yes. You know, in fact, I'm carrying a copy of the Constitution around in my pocket right now. It's sort of the hot topic of the day. But I got into that habit of having one pretty relatively close to me at all times back when impeachment happened. I was working for Hoekstra, And literally, we couldn't stop for gas without getting in an argument with somebody, who'd figure out who he was. And everybody's, I think, pointing to this document as something that we need to pay attention to, both sides of the aisle. Mm-hmm. Our problem is, as American citizens, very few of us know what it actually says. And I just want to encourage everybody out there listening, pick up a copy. It's not that long, not that complicated, and read it and try to understand it.
There's going to be a move today, too, with the new House of Representatives to cut congressional budgets by 5%. You get about $1 million, don't you, for a budget every year?
Yeah, yep. A little more than that. But, and there's, I think this goes into both the symbolic and the substantive. Are we going to solve the national deficit by cutting congressional budgets by 5%? No. But I tell you, it's about $35 million. And anytime you start thinking, well, $35 million, it's only $35 million, that's how we got into this problem. There is the substantive side of it, but we need to send the message to the American people that we get it, we understand it. Frankly, I don't see why the government can't go through what I've been going through in my little gravel company. We've been getting hacked at by the economy, and we've had to change how we do business. The only place in our economy in recent years that hasn't changed the way it's been doing business is the government, and that's wrong.
So that may or may not happen today. We do know for sure that even if the House goes ahead and votes to repeal the health care reform, it's going to the Senate where it's going to be dead in the water. The Senate has said so in a letter. So is that a symbolic effort too?
Well, it's both. Again, we need to make sure that the people that put us here, the people that elected us, that they know that we are going to not just talk about it, we're going to do it. And our actions are going to match our words. And frankly, our words were we are going to vote on repealing health care and replacing it with something that's more effective and works better. If we don't do this, MPS, that's pledge one right out the window. So, how are we supposed to look our constituents in the eye and say, well, I know we said that we were going to do this, but we just decided it wasn't going to be worth it because it was going to be futile. Now, we need to go out there and stake our territory, and I do believe that we need to set that marker, and then we start negotiating from there about what's going to happen on implementation and some of those other things. But we need to make sure that everybody, the Senate and the President and the media and everybody else, understands we're serious about it.
Real quickly, it looks like Representative Michelle Bachmann is thinking about making a presidential run. What do you make of that?
Hey, I've actually known Michelle back when she was a state senator in Minnesota, mm-hmm. and I was a state rep in Michigan. We went to a leadership institute in Wisconsin together, and she's very, very personable. She's a smart lady. Hey, it's America. Anybody can go be president. That's been proven. It's democracy in action. I encourage anybody who's feeling so inclined that they're going to get out there and take their shot at it too.
Thank you so much, Congressman. We'll talk again soon. Bill Huizenga from West Michigan. So I mentioned to you earlier that the question was, do Americans really care as much as we might think about fuel emissions in the cars and that kind of thing, and having a green technology in a vehicle? And Consumer Reports has the answer to that question. George Volman, the Automotive Insider. You can find him at theautomotiveinsider.com, is with us right now. Good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Michael. Patrick, how are you this morning?
Good. We're getting excited about the auto show next week. We're going to have lots of automotive guests, the North American International Auto Show there in Detroit, and Nancy Pelosi is going to come and have a walk around the floor again. She just ended her reign yesterday as Speaker of the House. She's House Minority Leader now, and I know that you're going to want to be there to get her autograph, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe she could hand me one of those big gavels like she did yesterday, but who knows?
I don't think she would give you the gavel for fear of what you might do with it.
Well, there you go.
She's going to be all smiles, though, and say that, look what we did for the auto business. Now sales are up, the big three. Sales are flat for Toyota, and the stock price for General Motors is up to 38%. Everything's coming up roses, and we heard this morning, too, that in terms of product perception and quality perception, Ford is now equal with Toyota.
Yeah, that was basically on the Consumer Reports survey that they did. That was almost a 75-point swing, with Ford coming up and Toyota going down. It was remarkable, but that just tells you how the perceptions work in the automobile business, and the fact that their cars do not break, okay, is absolutely going to drive that and continue to drive it, and then nothing but great things will happen for Ford because of that.
Some people said we'd never see the day where Americans thought that American cars were just as good in quality as Japanese cars, but that day has now come. And so now we step on the gas. Speaking of stepping on the gas, I mentioned there, the question is, do Americans really care about fuel economy and lowering auto emissions? Consumer Reports also did a study. And the word is that boosting fuel economy and lowering auto emissions isn't something many Americans really even care about. Only 28% of the people think that environmentally friendly or green is a major consideration when buying a car. It's a who cares attitude that runs counter to the government regulations that would increase the required mileage average to 62 miles per gallon in 2025. And hybrid electric vehicles are what Americans have asked for, but they don't really care about the emissions. How much of that comes into play when someone's considering buying a car on the ground at the dealer level?
At the dealer level, it comes down to what we've always talked about on this show. People will not swarm to electrics and hybrids until gasoline prices, and they'll do the calculation, force them to do it. And it's just that simple. And yet I think you're going to see a major upheaval in gasoline prices as the price of oil goes up as a function of the dollar and some of the other things that are going on in the marketplace, and that could trigger that back on. So in other words, they could take the survey when gas prices are $4 a gallon, and all of a sudden this becomes a very important thing. It's a whimsical thing based on the price of a gallon of gas. And people are always going to vote their pocketbook.
Yeah, well, we hear the gas prices come May could be very close to $4 again, $3.75 or something like that. Is that what you're hearing too?
That's what I'm hearing, and you know, the fact that they have the moratorium on drilling in the Gulf, and the fact that those platforms are going someplace else, we're not only going to have that higher priced gas, we're going to lose the jobs too, that doesn't smack it being terribly smart at this point.
Well, at the moment anyway, the Consumer Reports survey says that safety is the top priority for consumers who are buying a car. That's followed by quality, value, and then performance. Only past that do you get into whether the car is environmentally friendly. In your experience, do you find that to be true, that safety is first, followed by quality, then value?
Yes, and I will put the following caveat on it. When quality isn't there, all of a sudden that becomes the number one. So in other words, it's like, you know, fish discover water last, okay? Ultimately, if quality is there, then it becomes just what we call an entry-level thing. In other words, you have to have the quality in order for people even to consider your car. At that point, then it becomes those other issues. And since the quality of all the made automobiles right now are pretty high, guess what? That no longer becomes the number one issue. But you look at this thing 15 years ago, and it was the number one issue.
Yeah, they used to say at Ford, quality is job one, and George Volman spent a lot of time with General Motors and with Ford, too. And so travel safely, and we'll see you immediately on the automotiveinsider.com and down the road.
Thank you.
All the best to George Volman, the automotiveinsider.com. And Ndamukong Suh has to have surgery on his shoulder. Now, he's going to miss the Pro Bowl. He was elected to go to the Pro Bowl. He's going to go and not play, though, and just support Calvin Johnson. So have a nice time in Hawaii and get well soon. Michigan looking for a new football coach. The basketball team lost yesterday 65-50 in Madison, Wisconsin. Jack Morris and Alan Trammell didn't make the All-Star balloting for baseball. Only Roberto Alomar and Bert Blyleven are going to the Hall of Fame. Jim Harbaugh spent 5 hours with the San Francisco 49ers yesterday talking about their coaching position So it looks like maybe he's going to go to the Niners. Television viewers, thanks for being with us. Join us tomorrow morning or join us next hour on the radio. It's Michael Patrick Shields.
To come and play, to come and play. Bye now. Goodbye, goodbye, good friends, goodbye. 'Cause now it's time to go.